Hey, crime addicts! Welcome back to True Crime Continent, where we uncover the darkest mysteries, the most baffling disappearances, and the cases that refuse to let us sleep at night. I'm your host, Olivia, and on today's case, we're diving deep into a story that has haunted a small Pennsylvania community for 4 decades. Before we begin, if you're a fan of true crime cases and documentaries like this one, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Trust me, you're going to want to follow along as we unravel this mystery together. Now, imagine this. It's a regular Friday afternoon. Your child gets off the school bus, just like they have hundreds of times before. The bus stop is right at the end of your driveway. You can see it from your window. You can hear the bus pull up on the gravel road. It's maybe a 2-minute walk from the bus to your front door. What could possibly happen in your own driveway? This is exactly what Janice McKinney thought on February 22nd, 1985, when she decided to let her 8-year-old daughter walk that short distance home alone for the first time. It was a beautiful day. The sun was shining. The temperature was mild. It seemed perfectly safe. But her daughter never walked through that door. In those 150 yards, in broad daylight, with other children and parents nearby, an 8-year-old girl simply vanished. No screams, no signs of struggle, no witnesses to what actually happened. Just gone. For 40 years, a mother has lived with the guilt of that one decision. For 40 years, investigators have chased leads that go nowhere. For 40 years, a community has been haunted by the question, what happened to that little girl? And in the last few years, shocking new information has come to light. Information about abuse, about neighbors with dark secrets, about a family that may have known more than they ever told. Information that could finally answer the question that's been asked for 4 decades. This is the story of Cherrie Mahan. It's Friday, February 22nd, 1985. The temperature in Cabot, Pennsylvania is a mild 40 degrees. For most people, it's just another ordinary afternoon. But for one family, this day will mark the beginning of a nightmare that has lasted for 40 years. At exactly 4:10 p.m., a yellow school bus pulls up to its regular stop on Cornplanter Road in rural Winfield Township, Butler County. The bus doors fold open and several children step off, including 8-year-old Cherrie Mahan. She's wearing a gray coat over a white leotard, a blue denim skirt, blue leg warmers, beige boots, and cabbage patch earmuffs. Her big backpack is slung over her small shoulders. Cherrie has walked this route hundreds of times before. It's only about 150 yards from the bus stop to her family's trailer, up a gravel driveway. Less than 2 minutes. But Cherrie Mahan never makes it home that day. And in those 150 yards, somewhere between the school bus and her front door, an 8-year-old girl vanishes without a trace. No screams. No signs of struggle. No witnesses to what actually happened. 40 years later, Cherrie has never been found. But recent developments suggest that someone out there knows exactly what happened to her. And they might finally be ready to talk. Let me tell you about Cherrie Mahan. Cherrie was born on August 14, 1976, in Saxonburg, Pennsylvania. Her mother, Janice, was only 16 years old when she gave birth. The circumstances of Cherrie's conception were tragic. Janice had been raped at 15 years old, resulting in her pregnancy. But despite that horrific trauma, Janice absolutely adored her daughter. In fact, Janice later said, "We were always together. We grew up together. She was my life." They were more like sisters than mother and daughter in some ways, bonded by an incredibly close relationship. Janice was determined that nothing from Cherrie's conception would define who this little girl would become. And Cherrie was thriving. She was a bright, friendly, talkative child. Her teachers at Winfield Elementary School described her as popular and happy. She followed rules. She was responsible. She was the kind of kid who always checked in, always let her parents know where she was going. When Cherrie was young, Janice married a Vietnam veteran named Leroy McKinney. Leroy willingly and lovingly accepted Cherrie as a stepdaughter. By all accounts, they were a close-knit family, despite their struggles. Both Janice and Leroy dealt with substance use issues, and Leroy suffered from PTSD and mental health challenges from his time in Vietnam. Leroy was also part of a local motorcycle gang. They weren't perfect, but they loved Cherrie fiercely. In late 1984, just a few months before Cherrie disappeared, the family relocated. They moved from Janice's mother's house in Saxonburg to a trailer on Cornplanter Road in rural Butler County. For Cherrie, this move was exciting at first. She got her own room, her own bathroom. What 8-year-old girl wouldn't be thrilled about that? But something changed after they'd been in the new house for a few months. Cherrie started telling her mother that she was afraid. She said someone was watching her through her bedroom window. Now, Janice never saw anyone outside. At the time, she thought maybe it was just new home jitters, A kid adjusting to a new place, maybe letting her imagination run wild. But Janice took her daughter's concerns seriously anyway. She moved Cherrie into a smaller bedroom, one closer to her and Leroy's room. She bought blackout curtains to make Cherrie feel safer. But it didn't help. Even in the new room, Cherrie was terrified. She was so scared that she started sleeping on the floor with no pillows and no blankets. Think about that for a second. An 8-year-old child, so frightened that she won't even sleep in her own bed. It's like she was trying to hide, trying to make herself invisible. And this wasn't a one-time thing. This fear continued for months, right up until the day she disappeared. The question that haunts everyone is, was Cherrie's fear justified? Was someone really watching her? And if so, who? Let's go back to that Friday in February. Cherrie woke up excited that morning. Her mother had promised to take her on a play date after school. It was something Cherrie had been looking forward to all week. That morning, Janice walked with Cherrie down to the bus stop, like she usually did. When the yellow school bus arrived, they told each other, "I love you," and Cherrie climbed aboard. It was routine. It was normal. It was safe. That afternoon, the school bus made its regular stop at approximately 4:10 p.m. on Cornplanter Road. Now, this wasn't just Cherrie's stop. It was a designated bus stop where several children got off. Some of them walked to nearby homes. Some parents waited in their cars to pick up their kids. One of those parents was a woman named Debbie Burke. She had followed the school bus in her own car and was parked at the stop, waiting for her children. Debbie would later become a crucial witness, possibly the last person to see Cherrie Mahan alive. According to Debbie, Cherrie got off the bus with 3 friends at 4:10 p.m. The kids played together for a little while at the bus stop like kids do. Then Cherrie's friends got into Debbie's car. Debbie watched as Cherrie walked past her vehicle, heading in the direction of her driveway. Then Debbie drove away with her kids. And that was it. That was the last confirmed sighting of Cherrie Mahan. Back at the trailer, Leroy McKinney heard the school bus slow down and stop near their home. He could hear it from inside. The couple waited for Cherrie to walk through the door. But she didn't come. 5 minutes passed. Then 10 minutes. Now, for most of us, 10 minutes might not seem like a long time. But when you're waiting for your 8-year-old daughter, who only has to walk 150 yards, 10 minutes feels like an eternity. And Leroy knew something was wrong. He walked out to the front of the trailer first. Cherrie wasn't there. So he walked all the way down the driveway to the road, thinking maybe she'd stop to chat with a friend or play for a bit longer. But when he got to the road, there was no one there. The 2-lane back road was empty. Woods surrounded them on either side. And Cherrie was nowhere to be seen. That's when the panic really set in. Leroy rushed back to get Janice, and together they got in their car. Their first thought was logical. Maybe Cherrie had missed her stop. Maybe she was still on the bus. Maybe she'd never gotten off in the first place. So they chased down the school bus. They flagged down the driver. But the driver told them no, Cherrie had definitely been on the bus. She had gotten off at her regular stop, just like always. And now, both Janice and Leroy knew in their guts that something terrible had happened. They drove straight back home and called 911. Officers arrived within 10 to 20 minutes of the call. They were quick to respond, and they took the situation seriously right from the start. They conducted a preliminary search of the area. Even though it was relatively warm for February, there was still some snow on the ground, which actually helped in some ways. You'd think if someone had walked off into the woods or down the driveway, there would be footprints, right? But they didn't find any suspicious footprints. No prints that suggested which direction Cherrie had walked after getting off the bus. And they didn't find any of her belongings either. Not her bright blue backpack that should have stood out against the winter landscape. Not any of the clothes she'd been wearing. Nothing. As the hours ticked by, the search intensified. Police brought in bloodhounds to try to track Cherrie's scent. They deployed helicopters to search the surrounding woods from the air. They expanded their search to cover a 5-mile radius around the family's home. Local volunteers joined the effort. An estimated 250 people from the community came out to search for Cherrie. They combed through woods, checked drainage ditches, looked in abandoned buildings. The local community even raised $39,000 as a reward for Cherrie's safe return. A local business pledged an additional $10,000 for information leading to an arrest and conviction. But despite all of this effort, despite all of these people searching, they found nothing. No signs of Cherrie. No evidence of where she'd gone or what had happened to her. It was like she had simply vanished into thin air. Now, you might be wondering what police were thinking at this point. According to Janice, their first theory was that Cherrie was a runaway. But that didn't make sense. Cherrie was 8 years old. She was a rule follower. She had a playdate planned for that evening that she'd been excited about. She wouldn't have just wandered off. When police eventually abandoned the runaway theory, they did what investigators typically do in missing child cases. They looked at the parents. And honestly, this wasn't totally unwarranted. Statistics tell us that when a child goes missing, you have to start with the people closest to them. And Janice and Leroy definitely had things in their background that might raise red flags. They both struggled with substance use. Leroy had PTSD and mental health issues. He was part of a local motorcycle gang. So police questioned them, separately, for hours. They asked them to take polygraph tests. Both Janice and Leroy agreed, and both of them passed with no signs of deception. But according to Janice, even after passing the polygraphs, police still seemed to treat them like suspects. The investigation didn't just stop with them, though. Police widened their circle. The next person they looked at was Cherrie's biological father. Now, this is someone who had never really been part of Cherrie's life. Janice says he never wanted much to do with his daughter. But interestingly, he was also allegedly connected to a motorcycle gang, a different one than Leroy's. And according to Janice, he was supposedly pretty high up in this organization. When police approached him about Cherrie's disappearance, he was adamant that not only did he have nothing to do with it, but he wasn't even her father. Eventually, police were able to rule him out completely. There was nothing connecting him to Cherrie's disappearance. So if it wasn't the parents, and it wasn't the biological father, then who? Janice couldn't think of anyone who would want to hurt her daughter. Cherrie was sweet. She was bright. She was loved by everyone who knew her. But while Janice might not have been suspicious of anyone she knew, that didn't mean there wasn't someone to be suspicious of. Someone that Cherrie herself had been afraid of. Remember how Cherrie had been telling her mother that someone was watching her through her bedroom window? That fear that lasted for months before she disappeared? When Janice shared this with police, they realized they needed to talk to the other kids who had been on Cherrie's school bus that day. Maybe Cherrie had told them something. Maybe they'd seen something. The kids didn't know anything about someone watching Cherrie, but they did tell police something else. Something that would become one of the most talked about clues in this entire case. One of the children said there had been a bluish-green van following behind the school bus the day Cherrie disappeared. Now, blue-green vehicles might have been common in the mid-1980s. But this van? This van was unique. The child said it had a painting on the side. A mural showing a person skiing down a snowy mountain. You don't see that every day, right? It's distinctive. It's memorable. It's exactly the kind of detail that could crack a case wide open. When police interviewed more witnesses, they confirmed it. Other children had seen the van too. Debbie Burke, the mother who had been waiting at the bus stop, had also seen it. In fact, she'd seen it in her rearview mirror, trailing behind the school bus as it made its way to the stop. But here's the thing. At the time, it didn't seem suspicious to her. Cars follow school buses all the time, right? They're big, they're slow, they stop frequently. Whatever vehicle happens to be behind a bus just has to wait. So, Debbie didn't think much of it. The van had stopped when the bus stopped, just like any other vehicle would. Then, according to Debbie, it just kept going down the road after the bus stop. She didn't see it pull over. She didn't see Cherrie interact with it. It was just there, and then it was gone. Debbie has said that she made sure Cherrie had walked past her car safely before she drove away. She was the last person to see Cherrie, walking toward her driveway, presumably on her way home. But what happened after Debbie drove away? Could the van have circled back? Could it have pulled into a driveway and waited? Police had the van painted on missing person flyers. They described it as a possibly bright blue or green, likely a 1970s-era Dodge, possibly a 1976 model, with that distinctive mural of a skier on a snowy mountain on the side. But there was something else interesting in the description on those flyers. They also mentioned a small blue vehicle seen in the area. Wait, a blue van and a blue car? According to reporting, this came from a witness, though it's not clear who. For some reason, this blue car kind of fades from the narrative after a while. Police seem to focus all their attention on the unique van, probably because it was so distinctive. I mean, how many vans with skiing murals could there be in rural Pennsylvania? Turns out, at least 2. Police did find a van that matched the description. It belonged to a woman named Donna Patterson. Her van was blue, and yes, it had a painting of a skier going down a mountain on the side of it. She lived just 5 miles from where Cherrie disappeared. This had to be it, right? But when police investigated, they found that on the day and time of Cherrie's disappearance, Donna's van was parked at a local steel corporation where her brother-in-law worked. He had borrowed the van that day, and he was at work when Cherrie vanished. Police confirmed his alibi, and they ruled out both Donna and her brother-in-law. But that didn't stop people from harassing Donna. She said she constantly saw people writing down her license plate number. She got pulled over by police multiple times because people reported her van as the one involved in Cherrie's disappearance. And despite all the attention and harassment, Donna refused to stop driving the van or even paint over the mural. I have to admit, I think I would have immediately painted over it or sold that van. But Donna stood her ground. So if Donna's van wasn't involved, that means there was another van out there. Another blue or green vehicle with a skiing mural driving around Butler County on February 22nd, 1985. And whoever was driving that van has never come forward. Think about that for a second. If you were just innocently driving down that road that day, and then you found out a child went missing right where you'd been driving, wouldn't you come forward? Wouldn't you want to clear your name and help police? The fact that no one ever came forward to say, "That was my van, I was just driving by," is deeply suspicious. Some witnesses even reported seeing a blue car following the van. And there were reports that the van might have been repainted black 1 or 2 weeks after Cherrie's disappearance. But despite these leads, police never found the van. They never found the blue car. They never found Cherrie. As days turned into weeks, Cherrie's case started getting national attention. Her picture was featured on a rerun of NBC's Adam, a TV movie about 6-year-old Adam Walsh's abduction and murder. This was huge exposure. Millions of people saw Cherrie's face and heard her story. Cherrie became the first missing child to have her picture printed on postcards and sent around the country as part of the Have You Seen Me? Direct mail program. Thousands of these postcards were distributed, tucked inside utility bills and phone bills, reaching homes across America. And she was one of the first missing children to have her face printed on milk cartons. This program had literally just started the year she disappeared. Cherrie's face became one of those haunting images that defined an era, the face of a smiling little girl on your breakfast table, a daily reminder that she was still missing. The search went international too. Nickelodeon put Cherrie's information in hotels in Canada, Mexico, and even the UK. Authorities weren't ruling out that she might have been taken out of the country. Because when you don't have much to go on, when the circle of possibilities is infinitely wide, you can't rule anything out. The FBI got involved, bringing their resources and expertise. They looked into other disappearances where a blue or green van was either involved or seen nearby. They found cases. They found incidents. But they never found anything that definitively linked back to Cherrie. By 1998, 13 years after Cherrie disappeared, her case was ice cold. The leads had dried up. The tips had slowed to a trickle. The massive searches had yielded nothing. That year, Janice made one of the hardest decisions of her life. She had Cherrie legally declared deceased. She said she wasn't giving up. She wasn't moving on. But she had another child, a son named Robert, who had been born 4 years after Cherrie disappeared. And Janice needed to come to terms with the reality that Cherrie was most likely not alive anymore. Can you imagine making that decision? Signing papers that legally declare your daughter dead when you don't have a body, don't have proof, don't have answers? Pennsylvania law stated that 7 years had to elapse between a person's disappearance and the legal declaration of death. Janice had waited 6 years beyond that minimum. But finally, in November 1998, a Butler County judge approved her petition. In a statement to the media, Janice said, "When people die, you have a body. You kiss them upon the face, you put them in the ground, and you say goodbye. That's something I never had. This is not over. We'll always look for Cherrie. If nothing else, she'll always be alive in our hearts." And true to her word, Janice never stopped looking. She never stopped hoping for answers. But what she couldn't have known in 1998 was that 20 years later, those answers would start coming to her in the strangest ways. In 2018, 33 years after Cherrie vanished, Janice received a letter in the mail. It was handwritten on a single sheet of wide-ruled notebook paper. The letters were written in block capitals, deliberate and careful, and it was signed Pastor Justice. This anonymous letter contained detailed information about what happened to Cherrie. It claimed that Cherrie had been killed by friends of her biological father. These friends were part of what the letter called a Quaker cult who helped make Cherrie disappear. And why? According to the letter, it was all to help Cherrie's biological father evade paying child support. The letter gave specific details about where Cherrie's remains were supposedly buried, at a place called the Lock 8 Dam, about 25 miles away from where she disappeared. The letter ended with a chilling line: "I pray you find some peace after you find her body." Now, let's pause here for a second. Janice had no idea who these friends of the biological father might be. She wasn't familiar with the area the letter mentioned. And the whole Quaker cult angle? Quakers are known as pacifists. They're not exactly known for kidnapping and murdering children. The whole thing seemed bizarre. But after 33 years of nothing, police actually took it seriously enough to search the area mentioned in the letter. They found nothing. Was it a cruel prank? Was it someone with mental health issues who believed their own delusions? Was it someone trying to mislead the investigation? We don't know, but it opened up something. It got people talking about Cherrie's case again. It reminded the public that this little girl was still missing and her family still needed answers. And then, later that same year, something else happened. Janice got a phone call at work. The woman on the other end of the line thought she might be Cherrie. By this point, Cherrie would have been in her early 40s if she were alive. Can you imagine getting that call? Can you imagine the war between hope and self-protection that must have raged in Janice's heart? She was skeptical. She had to be. For her own survival, she couldn't let herself fully believe it. The fall from that height of hope would be devastating. But police compared the caller's fingerprints to Cherrie's fingerprints that had been taken at her elementary school back in the 1980s. They didn't match. The woman wasn't Cherrie. And Janice had to grieve all over again. Five more years passed. Then, in the spring of 2023, something happened that would blow this case wide open in a way no one expected. Janice went to her local VFW for a drink one evening. It was a regular spot for her, a place where she knew most of the faces. But that night, there was a man sitting at the bar that she didn't recognize, and he was staring right at her. Finally, Janice confronted him. "Hey, what's the deal?" The man responded with her name, but like a question. Like he knew her, but wanted to be sure. It turned out he didn't know her, and she knew him. They had grown up together, but Janice hadn't seen him since they were little kids. That's why she didn't recognize him at first. Let's call this man our source, because he's asked to remain anonymous. He says that what he told Janice that day, the information he shared, could put him in danger. What did he tell her? He said he knew one of Janice's former neighbors, a man named John Montgomery, who had lived across the street from Janice's mother's house in Saxonburg, back before the family moved to the trailer in Winfield Township. This was a name Janice knew well. Cherrie had often played with the Montgomery children at their house. After Cherrie disappeared, some members of the Montgomery family would even check in with Janice weekly, asking for updates, showing concern. But what this man told Janice in the VFW that day was shocking. He said that John Montgomery and another man had been abusing Cherrie before she disappeared, and he believed they might be involved in her disappearance. Janice's world was spinning. This was completely new information. She had never suspected anything like this. She hadn't seen any of the typical signs of abuse in Cherrie. No sudden behavior changes, no fear of being alone with certain people. The only thing she noticed was Cherrie's fear that someone was watching her after they moved away from the house that was across the street from the Montgomerys. Wait. After they moved away from that house, could the person Cherrie feared, the person she thought was watching her through her window, have been someone who had previously had access to her when they lived near the Montgomerys? Our source told Janice he hadn't always known about this abuse. He had moved away from the area and only moved back to Pennsylvania around 2010. After he returned, he learned about John Montgomery and another man abusing not just Cherrie but other kids in the neighborhood as well. Now, he didn't immediately connect this abuse to Cherrie's disappearance. But one day, he saw an old missing person flyer of Cherrie, the one with the blue car and the van we talked about earlier. And that's when he realized something. John Montgomery would have had access to a similar blue car around the time Cherrie disappeared. So our source went to police. This was around 2010, or shortly after. According to him, police took him seriously. They even set him up with a wire to go confront John Montgomery. While wearing the wire, our source confronted John. But John denied involvement in Cherrie's disappearance. He essentially blamed the other man he'd allegedly been involved with. Our source says that police talked to both John Montgomery and this other man. But we couldn't confirm this independently because Pennsylvania State Police wouldn't talk to us for this story. What we do know from other reporting is that authorities told media they had interviewed neighbors about Cherrie's disappearance, but no one had ever confessed to anything related to the case. Here's what's really troubling. Our source says he told police about multiple children being abused by these men. But when we checked court records, we couldn't find any record of charges against John Montgomery or the other man for child sexual abuse. So what does that mean? Did police not follow up? Did other victims never come forward, even as adults? Did something fall through the cracks? It's not unbelievable that abuse could go unreported. We know that many adults never report their childhood abuse. For children, those numbers are even higher. There's often a lack of understanding about what's happening to them. There's fear of getting in trouble. There's misplaced loyalty to their abuser. And if the abuser is someone they know and trust, which is usually the case, they're often told things like, "I'll get in trouble if you tell," or "Your family will be hurt if you say anything." In 2011, police told CNN that they believed Cherrie was likely abducted by someone she knew really well. A Pennsylvania state trooper said, and I quote, "I believe this person had the ability to basically lure Cherrie to their vehicle without her giving it a second thought prior to her disappearance." That statement aligns with what our source told Janice in 2023. John Montgomery died in 2022, so we can't ask him about any of this. Our attempts to reach the other man our source mentioned were unsuccessful. But the story doesn't end there. When Janice learned this information in 2023, she was at a loss. She didn't have a good relationship with the investigators on her daughter's case. She felt isolated from the investigation. And the man who told her this had already tried going to police years earlier. So what was she supposed to do? She kept it to herself for almost 2 years. But in 2025, Janice confided in her friend Bailey. She told her, "I'm at my wit's end. I just want answers. I feel like I'm so close, but still just out of reach." Bailey saw this as a cry for help, and she jumped into action. She started pushing law enforcement to look into leads. She created a Facebook page called Find Cherrie Mahan. She assembled a team called Cherrie's Angels and started working with a private investigator named Steve Ridge. Steve Ridge pledged $100,000 for anyone who could help find Cherrie's remains. While Steve did his work, Bailey started digging into John Montgomery's background, trying to find anything that would link him or the other man to child sexual abuse. She searched everywhere she could think of. And eventually, she stumbled onto a website called meganslaw.com, which tracks sex offenders. She was searching in the areas around both the house where Cherrie disappeared and her grandmother's house in Saxonburg, where they'd lived before. And suddenly, she saw a name that made her blood run cold. William Montgomery. John Montgomery's son. He goes by Buddy. Buddy Montgomery was already in prison when Bailey found him. He'd been locked up in 2022 for failing to register as a sex offender. The maximum sentence for that offense is 54 months, which means he'll likely be out by the end of 2026 if he hasn't been released already. But that wasn't his first offense. In 2004, Buddy Montgomery pleaded guilty to sexual assault, corruption of minors, endangering the welfare of children, and indecent assault. He cut a deal with prosecutors. Instead of facing 75 years in prison, he got about 2 years behind bars and 10 years of probation. 2 years for sexually assaulting children. 2 years. Now, we're not sure exactly where Buddy lived when Cherrie was living at her grandmother's house across from the Montgomerys. But multiple people who lived in the area at the time have confirmed that Buddy was definitely around. He was in his early 20s when Cherrie disappeared. When Bailey discovered Buddy's criminal record, she immediately gave the information to police. But Janice and Bailey weren't seeing much action from law enforcement in terms of running down leads. So Janice decided to take matters into her own hands. At the beginning of April 2025, Janice wrote a letter to Buddy Montgomery in prison. She told him she wanted to talk to him about Cherrie. She said she was trying to figure out what happened and that she needed closure after 40 years. She acknowledged that his father hadn't been a good person and said, "Listen, I'm sorry for all that you've been put through and have seen." It was a compassionate approach, an appeal to whatever humanity Buddy might have. And it worked. Less than 2 weeks later, Buddy responded. Buddy's first letter back was pretty vague. He basically just said he wanted to help. So Janice wrote back asking him to put her on his visitation list. She just wanted to get in front of him, to look him in the eye and hear what he had to say. But it was weeks before he responded again. When he finally did, Buddy apologized for the delay. He said he'd had a heart attack and had been in the hospital. He still said he wanted to talk to her. Janice kept sending short messages. "When can I come see you? When can we at least talk on the phone?" But Buddy kept dodging her. He wouldn't commit to a visit. He wouldn't set up a phone call. Finally, at the end of June, Janice scheduled a prison visit anyway. She showed up on the appointed day, ready to finally get some answers. But Buddy wouldn't come out. He refused to see her. Janice tried to schedule another visit. But before it could happen, Buddy sent a message to the person who was helping Janice communicate with him in prison. The message said, "I just received word that Janice had made arrangements for a contact visit on Saturday. Please let her know that I will not accept it until I have a chance to set things up the way I want it set up." Set things up the way he wanted them? What did that mean? He laid out his terms in more letters. He said he wanted his story televised for his own protection. He wanted a news organization involved. So media reached out to Buddy. They sent him letters in April, though it's not clear if he received them because he didn't respond. In late July, they tried again using the prison email system. They asked if he would speak about the case because his name had come up. They sent him a list of questions about the things they'd heard, about the allegations against his father. Finally, Buddy responded. He wrote, "After reading your questions, I am so disgruntled over the fact that you are hearing these lies and would want nothing other than an opportunity to sit down with you and talk." Great. An opportunity to talk. That's what everyone wanted. But when the media tried to set up that talk, tried to arrange a phone call, Buddy kept avoiding them, just like he'd avoided Janice. In the meantime, more information was coming to light. The private investigator, Steve Ridge, had gotten a tip from someone locally who knew the Montgomerys. This person told him that a backpack, possibly Cherrie's, had allegedly been submerged in a pond somewhere on the 28-acre Montgomery property sometime after Cherrie disappeared. When the media tracked down the person who gave Steve that tip, they confirmed some similar details, but the specifics of what actually happened were hazy. And there's something else interesting. It's not clear if the Montgomery property was ever searched in connection with Cherrie's disappearance. A former friend of Buddy's also came forward. Let's call him Mike. Mike said he'd known Buddy for a long time. One day, he went to meet Buddy at his house and walked up on him having a phone conversation. In that conversation, Mike heard Buddy mention Cherrie. When Mike confronted him about it, Buddy allegedly told him that his father John had chose her and went on to say that his dad was involved in her disappearance. Mike says he told police about this incident, but again, we couldn't confirm this with law enforcement because they wouldn't talk to the media. So journalists went back to Buddy with all of this. They asked him about the backpack allegedly in the pond. They asked him about Mike's allegations. They asked him directly if he was involved in Cherrie's disappearance. Buddy's response? A strongly worded no to the backpack question. And then he said he was going to send a letter where he'd be very direct. Everyone waited. The anticipation was intense. Finally, the letter arrived. 8 pages long. Let me give you the key parts. Buddy wrote, quote, "I also want to make it very clear to you, especially those who are formulating such moronic lies and whoever else thinks/believes that I may have had anything to do with the disappearance of Cherrie Mahan to go straight to the enslavements of hell." He goes on to say that the truth will be found when, quote, "the right questions are asked to those within my father's little circle. I was never part of this circle." He claims he never met or spoke to Cherrie. He says he didn't even know that Janice had moved from across the street from the Montgomery house, so he wouldn't have known where Cherrie was being dropped off after school. But here's what's confusing. Buddy still maintains that he has information. He says he didn't go to police or to Janice with this information because he didn't want to spread a false narrative. What does that even mean? If you have information that could help solve a 40-year-old missing child case, why would you withhold it? Because you're worried about spreading false information. And then Buddy laid out his terms for talking. He says he wants to be interviewed on live television while hooked up to a polygraph exam. That's where things stand as of this recording. Media outlets are still trying to make that happen, still trying to nail down a time with Buddy to actually hear what he knows. But we had to move forward with this story, because this is where we need help. Just as we were preparing this episode, major breaking news emerged in Cherrie's case. And this might be the most significant development in decades. Over the weekend of September 27th and 28th, 2024, cadaver dogs were deployed to search for Cherrie's remains. Steve Ridge, the private investigator who pledged that $100,000 reward earlier this year, confirmed that teams of cadaver dog handlers were brought in to search a specific location. For confidentiality reasons, Ridge couldn't reveal exactly where they searched or how many dogs were involved. But he did say something crucial: the location lined up with other leads he had received throughout his investigation. According to the Find Cherrie Mahan Facebook page, the cadaver dog teams came from Hubbard, Ohio, and Hamburg, Pennsylvania. These are specialized teams trained specifically to detect human remains, even those that have been buried for decades. The search had to be paused due to several factors: dense foliage making it difficult to navigate, loss of daylight, and exhausted dogs. But according to the Facebook post, the plan is to bring the teams back later in the fall for a more thorough search of what they're calling the pinpointed area. Think about those words for a second. Pinpointed area. That suggests they're not just randomly searching. They have specific intelligence, specific information that's led them to this location. Ridge was careful to manage expectations, though. He said that even if the dogs detect human remains, there's no guarantee they would belong to Cherrie. They would have to actually recover the remains and then conduct DNA testing to confirm an identity. But here's what's really interesting. This is a totally independent operation. Ridge emphasized that this search was done independently of Pennsylvania State Police, though he says they have a very good relationship with law enforcement. The state police are approaching the investigation with their resources in one way, and Ridge's team is trying to supplement and complement what law enforcement is doing. What does this tell us? It tells us that after 40 years, people are still actively searching. New information is still coming in. And most importantly, there's still hope that Cherrie can be found and brought home. Ridge said his team has been receiving information on an ongoing basis about potential locations of remains. That means people are coming forward. Maybe people who've been silent for years are finally ready to talk. Maybe new witnesses are emerging. Maybe old stories are being reconsidered in a new light. The timing of this search is particularly interesting given everything we've learned about Buddy Montgomery and his father John. Remember that tip Steve Ridge received about a backpack possibly being submerged in a pond on the Montgomery property? Could this search be related to that tip? We don't know for certain, but the timing is worth noting. As of the recording of this episode, we don't yet know the results of the cadaver dog search. The teams are planning to return for a more thorough search later this fall, and we'll be following this story closely. Because after 40 years of searching, after 40 years of dead ends and false leads and dashed hopes, we might finally be close to bringing Cherrie home. Someone out there knows what happened to Cherrie Mahan. Someone knows where she is. Someone knows who took her. Someone knows why an 8-year-old girl never made it home from the school bus that February day in 1985. Maybe you're listening to this right now, and you know something. Maybe you've known something for 40 years, but you've been too afraid to come forward. Maybe you told police once, but nothing came of it, and you gave up. Or maybe you know something, but you think it's not important enough to matter. Maybe you saw something that day that seemed insignificant at the time. Maybe you know someone who had access to a blue van with a skiing mural. Maybe you know something about John Montgomery or Buddy Montgomery or the other man who's been mentioned in connection with this case. Whatever you know, no matter how small it seems, it could be the piece that finally brings Janice the closure she's been seeking for 40 years. Janice just wants to know what happened to her daughter. She wants to know where Cherrie is. She wants to be able to say goodbye properly, something she's never been able to do. Because when someone dies under normal circumstances, you have a body. You can kiss them one last time. You can hold a funeral. You can visit their grave. You have rituals that help you process grief and move forward. But Janice has never had any of that. For 40 years, she's lived in this limbo between hope and despair, never knowing if her daughter is alive or dead, never knowing if she suffered, never knowing who took her or why. That's a special kind of torture that no parent should ever have to endure. And beyond just finding answers for Janice, this case highlights something bigger that we need to talk about. We often teach our children about stranger danger. We tell them not to talk to strangers, not to get in cars with people they don't know, to run away if a stranger tries to grab them. And those are important lessons. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Most children who are abducted or abused are victimized by people they know. According to statistics, about 90% of child sexual abuse is committed by someone the child knows and trusts. It's a family member, a family friend, a neighbor, a coach, a teacher, a religious leader. These are people who have access to our children. People we trust. People our children trust. And that makes it so much harder to detect and prevent. If what's been alleged about the abuse Cherrie may have suffered before her disappearance is true, then she was being victimized by people in her community, possibly by a neighbor whose children she played with. How do we protect our kids from that? The answer is complicated. We can't lock our children away from the world. We can't suspect every adult who interacts with them. We can't live in a state of constant paranoia. But we can be vigilant. We can pay attention to changes in our children's behavior. We can create an environment where our kids feel safe telling us anything, even things that are scary or confusing, or that they've been told to keep secret. We can teach them about body autonomy, about consent, about the difference between good secrets and bad secrets. We can tell them that if any adult ever asks them to keep a secret from their parents, that's a bad secret, and they need to tell immediately. We can trust our instincts. If something feels off about a person or a situation, we should listen to that feeling. And we can believe children when they tell us something is wrong. Remember, Cherrie told her mother that someone was watching her through her window. Janice took that seriously. She moved Cherrie to a different room, bought blackout curtains, did everything she could to help her daughter feel safe. But what if that fear was based on something real? What if someone really was watching Cherrie, someone who had been abusing her before the family moved? We'll probably never know for sure. But it's a reminder that when children express fear or discomfort, we need to listen and investigate, not just dismiss it as imagination. If you or someone you know has experienced child sexual abuse or any kind of sexual abuse, there are resources available. RAIN operates the National Sexual Assault Hotline, available 24/7. You can call them, text them, chat online, or even send them a WhatsApp message. It's free, confidential, and always available. And if you need immediate help, you can text HOPE to 741741 to reach the crisis text line. You are not alone. What happened to you is not your fault. And it's never too late to get help or to report abuse, even if it happened decades ago. February 22nd, 2025 marked the 40th anniversary of Cherrie Mahan's disappearance. 40 years of Janice waking up every single day wondering where her daughter is. 40 years of birthday cakes with candles that will never be blown out. 40 years of Christmas presents that will never be opened. 40 years of hoping for a phone call that never comes. Every year on a date close to the anniversary, Cherrie's family and friends gather at a restaurant in East Butler for a remembrance dinner. They share stories about Cherrie, keep her memory alive, support each other through the ongoing grief. 4 of Cherrie's childhood friends attend every year. They've said that Cherrie's disappearance had a profound impact on their lives. And now that they're mothers themselves, they have an even deeper empathy for what Janice has endured. Can you imagine? These women were 8 years old, playing with Cherrie at the bus stop one moment, and the next moment their friend was gone forever. They've grown up, gotten married, had children of their own, watched their children grow up. And through all of that, Cherrie has remained 8 years old in their memories, frozen in time at that bus stop on February 22nd, 1985. Cherrie would be 49 years old now if she's still alive. She'd be approaching 50, perhaps a mother herself, maybe even a grandmother. But more likely, she's been gone for nearly as long as she was alive. 8 years of life, 40 years of being missing. That bluish-green van with the skiing mural has never been found. The small blue car has never been identified. Cherrie's blue backpack has never been recovered. Her remains have never been located. The case is still open. Pennsylvania State Police continue to accept tips and investigate leads. In 2011, police said they received what they called potentially crucial information from someone known to Cherrie, information that pointed to a known specific actor or actors. They said this was the most specific information they'd received in years. Was that information from the source, who later spoke to Janice at the VFW? Was it about John Montgomery and the alleged abuse? We don't know because police won't tell us. But what we do know is that investigators believe Cherrie was likely abducted by someone she knew well, someone who could lure her to their vehicle without her giving it a second thought. Someone she trusted. That's the most heartbreaking part of all of this. In her final moments, Cherrie probably wasn't scared. She probably went willingly because she had no reason to believe she was in danger. She was 150 yards from home. She could probably see her trailer from where she was walking. Her mother and stepfather were waiting inside for her. Safety was so close. But she never made it. And somewhere out there, someone knows why. If that someone is you, if you have any information about what happened to Cherrie Mahan, please come forward. Contact Pennsylvania State Police. Contact the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Contact a local news organization. Contact anyone who can help bring answers to Janice after 40 years of not knowing. You can do it anonymously if you're afraid. But please do it. Because Janice deserves to know what happened to her daughter. Cherrie deserves justice. And the truth deserves to come to light, no matter how long it's been buried. As I researched this case and put this script together, I kept coming back to one moment. That moment when Janice heard the school bus arrive that February afternoon. When she and Leroy decided Cherrie could walk down the driveway alone because it was a nice day, because what could possibly happen in your own driveway? That one small decision. A decision that probably seemed completely reasonable and safe at the time. A decision that millions of parents make every single day, without consequence. But for Janice and Leroy, that decision changed everything. And I know that Janice has replayed that moment in her mind thousands of times over the past 40 years. The what-ifs, the if-onlys, the guilt, even though she has nothing to feel guilty about. Because she couldn't have known. There was no way to know that this day would be different from every other day. But that's the thing about tragedy. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't give warning. It just happens in an instant, and everything changes forever. Cherrie Mahan got off a school bus on February 22nd, 1985, wearing her Cabbage Patch earmuffs and her blue leg warmers, carrying her backpack, ready to go home and get ready for her play date. She should have grown up. She should have gone to high school, graduated, maybe gone to college. She should have fallen in love, maybe gotten married, maybe had kids of her own. She should have lived her life, whatever that life might have been. Instead, she became a face on a milk carton, a cautionary tale, an unsolved mystery. But she was so much more than that. She was Janice's whole world. She was a bright, friendly little girl who loved her mom, who was excited about a play date, who followed the rules and always checked in. She was Cherrie, and she deserves to be remembered as more than just a missing child statistic. She deserves justice. She deserves to be found. She deserves peace. And her mother deserves answers. So please, if you know something, anything at all, come forward. Send a message to the official Facebook page, Find Cherrie Mahan. Link to the Facebook page will be in the description below. Cherrie should be here today, laughing with her children, maybe holding a grandbaby in her arms, telling stories about growing up in Cabot in the 80s. She should be calling her mom to say, "Don't make a fuss, it's just a birthday." Instead, her chair is empty and her laughter is missing from the room. This year, as we remember Cherrie on her 49th birthday, we promise we will never stop searching. Janice, who is now 65 years old, weak. With the sun beating down and temperatures near 90 degrees, she is still out there with us, pushing through the heat, wading creeks, climbing rocky hills, and covering miles of rough ground. All for Cherrie. Most people would have given up or slowed down by now. But Janice's love, determination, and strength are unmatched. She is living proof of what a mother's love looks like in its rawest form. Let's bring Cherrie home. That's the story of Cherrie Mahan, a case that has remained unsolved for 40 years but may finally be on the verge of a breakthrough. As we've seen throughout this investigation, the answers might have been hiding in plain sight all along, buried in a community's darkest secrets. If this case affected you the way it affected me, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let me know. Do you think Buddy Montgomery knows more than he's saying? Do you believe the anonymous letter from Pastor Justice had any truth to it? Or do you have your own theory about what happened to Cherrie? And if you're passionate about true crime and want to see more deep dives into cases like this, please hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. We cover unsolved mysteries, cold cases, and criminal investigations every week here on True Crime Continent, and your support helps us continue bringing these important stories to light. Don't forget to like this video if you found it informative and share it with anyone who might have information about Cherrie's disappearance. You never know who might be watching, who might finally be ready to come forward after all these years. For Janice McKinney, who has waited 40 years for answers, for Cherrie, who deserves justice, and for all the missing children who are still waiting to be found, we won't stop searching. We won't stop asking questions. And we won't let these cases be forgotten. Until next time, crime addicts, stay safe out there, and remember, if you see something, say something. Your voice could be the one that finally brings someone home. This is Olivia, signing off from True Crime Continent. I'll see you in the next case.